We're on Parshas Bo on page 340. So it begins, V'yomer Hashem al Moshe Bo el Paro, ki ani ivadi es livo. Hashem tells Moshe, go see Pharaoh, because I have made his heart hard. V'es lev avodov, and also the hearts of his servants. L'man shtashi oso siyas eila b'kirvo, so that I should have my wonders done because of him. So we have to understand a couple of basic things here. First thing is, why? What's so important that Hashem has to keep hardening his heart in order so that his wonders should be seen? Like, in other words, like Hashem finally wants to show off. He wants to show everybody all the amazing things he can do. So he's making Pharaoh into his fall guy. So that's what it sounds like, but of course that's not the case. What this is that Hashem is saying once and for all, he's telling the world, okay, I realize you can't see me, and there's no physical relationship with me, right? It's spiritual. So I'm going to show you once and for all that I exist. So you should know, number one, I created the world, and number two, I'm involved with the world. So by virtue of the fact that I'm doing this, that's why this is so significant. Because people all the time, they say, why does he go through all this? What's the purpose? And the purpose is that he is going to, one time in history, become very clear to the entire world that I am who I say I am, and I am God. From this point on, if you come and say, I don't believe there's such a thing as God, well, I'm showing you in history, I did this. Right? Of course, people are much less intelligent than God is giving us credit for. Because what happens, of course, is every generation, people don't take the time to study. So they don't know history. They don't know what's going on in the world. And therefore, they will accept any type of foolishness that somebody says in order to say that God isn't real. Like, I always hear this one about the splitting of the Red Sea, which will be coming up in another week. Right? The splitting of the Red Sea is an enormous miracle. Right? So if you want to tell me it didn't happen, right, it was made up, so I can understand your point of view. I can understand you say that. But if you to tell me, oh, it's no big deal, it's science. There's a certain time when the winds were blowing in just the right way that it just happened to happen, and it'll happen every X number of thousands of years. This will happen, right? That's what people say. I've heard this from people, and so let's say, in my opinion, I'd say let's say they're right. So first thing, who created that it should happen like that once every X numbers of thousands of years? God, who created the world. But even forget that. The fact that it happened right at the moment that they needed it to happen, and it closed at the moment they needed it to close, right? Even if God set it up years and years before that it's just a fluke of science that the wind will blow in a certain way and a body of water will split. The fact that it happened at that exact moment in and of itself is a miracle. So let's say splitting water is not a miracle, right? And closing water is not a miracle. The only miracle then would be that it happened at the moment they needed it, right? And that's really what God's doing here. God is saying that the world has the obligation to listen to my will. And I'm saying the Jews are to come out now. Pharaoh says no, so I'm going to now prove for all time, for all history, for all the future, that I exist, and that in order for the world to run correctly, you have to follow my way. And that's exactly what he does. And he proves it right here. This is why so many mitzvahs that we have are what we call Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim, remembering the going out of Egypt. You wear tefillin going out of Egypt. We keep Shabbos to remember the going out of Egypt. We have Pesach to remember the going out of Egypt. There's 10, 15 mitzvahs that deal with the reason that you do this mitzvah is to remember the going out of Egypt. And that's because the going out of Egypt is the proof. It is the one serious proof in the history of time that the Torah is true and that God is real. And that the only time somebody can say it's not true is if they haven't studied it. If you study it and you look at it, you are able to see that this actually is God intervening in nature. God is breaking the laws of nature, and he's doing this. Now, another point is that people think that this is so long ago, there's no way of knowing it. But if you think about it, it isn't all that long ago. Right? It's basically 3,300 years ago. But if you think about it in the life of people, like each generation is about 35 years, right? So for something to have happened 3,500 years ago, right, and that means you had 100 generations between then and now. And let's say that most of the people in this room can remember back 3 generations. Do you know someone who was alive 3 generations ago? My great-grandmother would have been 3 generations ago. If any of you knew your grandmothers, since most of us are grandparents, right? Present company accepted, of course, some who aren't, but many of us who are, we could say that from our grandchildren or our great-grandchildren, going back to who we remember ourselves, you could say it's 7 generations. Well, it's only 100 generations between when the Torah was given or when this happened and today. So if we could be 7 generations, how many of us does there have to be, right? So then you need 15 people like that going back. That's not that many. And to be able to say, well, there's no proof, that's sort of odd to say, because you don't need that many people who would know the 3 generations before them. And then the people who were before who say, well, I know my great-grandmother also had a great-grandmother. And her great-grandmother knew her great-grandmother. How many people like that do you need? You only need 15 like that. There's not that many. So for us to say, oh, it's prehistoric times, who could think back that far? It's not that hard. It's not that far back. So just an idea as to why it's so important.
Rabbi Plotkin from Green Lane, I think his grandfather is still alive, isn't he, Sheila? I think his grandfather, and he's a grandfather.
Right.
That makes him a great-great-grandfather.
Right, well, these things are definitely possible. And if it wasn't for war, there'd be more, right? I know that my parents, it was normal for them not to have grandparents, right, because of the wars, or to even have parents, some of them. So he goes on that I have hardened the heart of Pharaoh, so I want you to go back. And he says, so that you can relate in the ears of your son and your son's son that I made a mockery of Egypt, and my signs that I placed among them, that you may know that I am Hashem. You'll notice that of all of the plagues, there's only one plague where it says that you shall relate into the ears of your son and your son's son. In other words, throughout the plagues, God sends Moshe to Pharaoh. He does the plague. Pharaoh decides, I'm letting the Jews go. God hardens his heart that he shouldn't let the Jews go. Moshe comes back to give him another plague. Right? That's what happens. But only in this one case, after the plague of the locusts, does God say to him, I've hardened his heart, go back. That's always. But the reason is so that you should be able to tell your children and your children's children how I made a mockery of Egypt. Right? It's only at this plague. No other plague. It doesn't say it after darkness, doesn't say it after the frogs. It says it only after the one of the locusts. So what's unique about the locust, the one with the locusts, that there's something about that plague that is concrete, that I can tell my grandchildren as a proof that this happened. And what that is based on a medrash. There's a medrash that explains that when God said that there are going to be locusts going over the land, when he repels the locusts, and we saw that, we see it here, that he says that these locusts, when he gets rid of them, he says there'll be no more locusts in Egypt. Not there'll be no more locusts now. There'll be no more locusts in Egypt forever. So that today, in 2015, you could have the countries around Egypt having plagues of locusts, which happens over there. I've seen it. And it won't happen in Egypt. And according to this is telling you that, and that's why you can tell your children and grandchildren, because your children and grandchildren are going to see, as the world will have these plagues of locusts, and Syria will have locusts, and this place will have this place, Egypt will not have it. It'll go right up to their border, and it won't go any further. And therefore, you have a concrete way of showing your children because of this plague. And you see it when he says that Moshe and Aaron came to Pharaoh, and so said Hashem, when you refuse to be humble before me, send out my people. I shall bring a locust swarm right into your border. It will cover the surface. Right? So at the bottom of the page, Pharaoh's servants say, how long will this be a snare for us? Send out the men that they can serve their God, and this idea of the locust will be gone. So Moshe and Aaron came back, and he said, go serve your God. And Moses says, we're taking everyone, So it says in verse 12, Hashem says to Moses, stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for the locust swarm, and I will ascend upon the land of Egypt and eat all the grass in the land, everything that they had left. Moses stretched his hand out, right? And the locust comes. The locusts are coming now. They covered the surface of the entire land. The land was darkened. They ate all the grass of the land, all the fruit of the trees. No greenery remained. Pharaoh calls Moshe, I've sinned, right? I made a mistake. That they should go, forgive my sin, and please ask God to remove from me this death of locusts. He left Pharaoh, and he goes to God. God turns back a powerful west wind, and it carried the locusts and out to the Sea of Reeds. Not a single locust remained within the entire border of Egypt. Hashem strengthened the heart of Pharaoh, and he sent out the children of Israel. And so here when it says that he remained it said that he sent them out. Right, there was not a single locust remained within the entire border of Egypt. In the Hebrew, it teaches us, it means that there will never be a locust in Egypt. And therefore, that is why this plague says, you can tell this to your children, because your children will notice that there are no locusts in Egypt. Right, the darkness, right, they're not going to, I'll tell you that it was so dark in Egypt for all of this period, right, they were under the plague, that they couldn't even move. The darkness was physical. It stopped you from moving. It wasn't like today, darkness is just a lack of light. That darkness had substance to it. I can't prove it to you. I can't show it to you. I don't have a jar of it. But I can show you that there were no more locusts in Egypt. That's what the point of what he's saying there. All right. Another important thing just to say before we get into the specifics is you'll notice that when it talks to us about, in this PARSHA, how God says, you have to, you're going to leave Egypt. It says that we left Egypt very quickly, right? We left with haste. And that morning, we left right away. We left so fast that something couldn't happen, remember? We couldn't bake the bread, right? So because of that, we eat matzah, okay? But then it says that why do we eat moror on Passover? Because of the 200 and plus years of slavery. So you tell me, if you wanted to remember the going out of Egypt, like I could understand that we eat more because we were slaves for so long, but we make such a big deal over eating matzah on Passover. Why? Because we didn't have time to make matzah. That's why. Well, so why didn't they take the time to make matzah? They knew they were going. God said, I'm going to take you out. They knew it, right? So it's not a big deal that they didn't have enough time to make their bread, so they ate matzah. And then we have this whole holiday celebrating the fact that they didn't have enough time to make bread. Like, it doesn't make any sense. We eat moror because we were slaves. That's a good reason to say, okay, we're going to eat matzah every year for a week because we were slaves. But it doesn't say that. It's because we went out so fast. But we eat moror because we were slaves. So what's the big deal with the matzah? It doesn't seem to be so important. It's only because we were in a hurry. So the real idea is like this, that when God told Moshe to go to Pharaoh, and God said he's going to bring the plagues onto Pharaoh, and God sent the first plague, the Jews said, we're going to leave. They packed. They were ready to go, and they didn't go. So along comes the second plague. Okay, this thing's happened. We're ready to go now. And they didn't go. And then the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth, by the time they get to the eighth or the ninth, they said, you know what, we ain't going anywhere. God keeps telling us, pack your bags, right? Go send in a note to the post office, you're going on vacation for a while, that's it. And they keep doing it, nothing happens, right? Nothing. So finally, when the 10th plague comes, the Jews say, yeah, we'll pack when it's time to go. We're not doing this every day. Like every time we turn around, we got to pack all our stuff, then unpack and pack and unpack and pack and unpack. Right? So they gave up. They said, we're not going anywhere. Right? So finally, when it came time for the last plague, and the Jews finally were leaving, they weren't ready because they didn't believe it was going to happen. They really had a doubt because they kept saying it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Let's get ready, and it didn't happen. How many times you cry wolf before you give in? Right? So this tells you why the fact that we eat matzah then was because God kept his word. God said, I'm going to take you out of Egypt. I'm going to prove to the world that I exist, and I'm going to prove to the world that you are my nation. He did that in this whole process. He kept his word. We, on the other hand, became disillusioned. Because we became disillusioned and God kept his word, That's why we eat matzah. It's not just because we weren't ready, right? It's because we gave up too early. It's like, I know that's human nature. That, you keep crying wolf. Sooner or later, nobody's going to come. But there's a difference. If your own child keeps crying wolf, the fact is you still go. Even though, the kid, yells out one night, in the middle of the night, I don't know, I hear noise outside, there's a burglar, right? So you run around, you look around, there's no burglar. The second time he does it, you run around, there's no burglar. By the fourth or fifth time, you don't believe there's a burglar. What do you go? Yeah, you go. It's your son, it's your daughter, it's a little kid. You go because you want him to feel better, right? That was God's relationship with us. God said, I know you think that I'm crying wolf, that we're going to leave. We're going to leave. We're going to leave. We're going to leave. We don't leave, right? So you give up on me. But if you really love God, just like God loves you, you would not allow that to happen. And so it taught us a lesson on the one hand, that if God says something He's going to do, He's going to do it. Not necessarily in the way that we think, it's the way He thinks. And that God's love for us shows that He is totally faithful to us, and that He does fulfill what He says He's going to. And we're the ones who have to fix our ability to understand that. And that's why matzah is so important in Pesach, because of that idea. Okay, so now here we have, at the bottom of 345, right, we have this last plague that's going on at this point. And then Hashem strengthens the heart of Pharaoh, and he doesn't want to send out the Jewish people. And Pharaoh says, go from me, beware, do not see my face anymore. From the day you do, you'll die. Right? He's telling Moshe, don't come back. You come back again, I'm going to kill you. I'm sick of you. So Moshe says, you're right. I won't see you again. I'm not coming back. Right? So Hashem says to Moshe, there's one more plague that I'm going to do. Right? And he says, send it forth from me. And he was sent forth, it shall be complete. Right? He shall drive you out of here. Please speak in the ears of the people. Let them go and take whatever it is they want from the people, and then I'm going to kill the firstborn. That's the last one. And you'll notice that Moshe does not go back to Pharaoh and tell him. Right? He says, you see here it says, Hashem granted the people favor in the eyes of Egypt, and they got what they needed. And then Moses says, so says God, at about midnight I shall go out from the midst of Egypt, right? And every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh onward. Right? But against all the children of Israel no dog will wet his tongue. Then all of the servants of yours will come down to me, leave you, the entire people that follows you. After that I'll leave. And then he left Pharaoh, and he's not coming back. Right, at that point, he tells them, I'm going to do the plague, the last plague. Now, there's a question that always comes up. There's two sides to this question. One is, look what we're dealing with here. Here we have Pharaoh. He's the most powerful man in the world, right? He's like the most powerful dictator too. It's like he doesn't have rules. He doesn't have to answer to Congress. He doesn't have to answer to the Parliament. So what's the deal? That Pharaoh doesn't just kill Moshe. Just put a hit on him. Get rid of him. Moshe's the troublemaker. Kill Moshe. Get rid of him, and let's forget all of this. Why doesn't he do that? Why doesn't he at least try to do it? Let's say he puts a hit on him and God guards him. Okay, but he doesn't even try. Why doesn't Pharaoh try to get rid of Moshe? Right? And the answer is because Pharaoh was the real deal. Pharaoh wasn't like today's, dictators. Today's dictators pretend to be something, but in the bottom line, they're just filling their pockets. That's what they're doing, right? They say Arafat was a multimillionaire, and Gaddafi, and all of these, very somewhat at least appeared to be evil to us people, were really rich. Why? Because what did they do? They raided their own country, and they took the money for themselves. Right? So they weren't true believers in themselves. They were believers in the money. While Pharaoh believed he was God. Pharaoh believed he was God. He believed that I'm the most powerful person. Nobody is going to tell me what to do. I'm a God. Your God's not more powerful than me, and I'll show you. Because as soon as Pharaoh would try to put a hit on Moshe, even if he would actually put a hit on Moshe himself, right? Then the whole world sees that Pharaoh's a fake. It's not a war of ideology anymore. Before it was Pharaoh says I'm God, God says he's God. Who's right? That's ideology. God's going to prove, I'm the God of the world. Pharaoh's an idiot. He's just another person. Right? I'm going to prove it. If Pharaoh goes and tries to kill Moshe, then he's telling the world it's true. I'm not another God. I'm trying to get rid of this guy Moshe so that I can just continue doing what I'm doing. The fact that he doesn't kill Moshe is because he truly believes in himself. He really believes who he is. And one way we can tell is that in this plague here, where you have the plague of the firstborn, it says that at midnight, right, it says that a cry goes out in Egypt. It's coming up in the next page. That a cry goes out in Egypt because everybody wakes up to find dead people in their house. Every single family had somebody, at least one person died in their house in Egypt. So everybody wakes up screaming because their children are dead, their husband's dead, somebody's dead in their house, right? So it says that the screams of the people woke up Pharaoh. It says that he got up. And Rashi adds, from his bed. So you have to wonder, why does Rashi tell us that Pharaoh got up from his bed? What do I care where he was? He got up in the middle of the night because he heard that God actually killed the firstborn, like he said, if you would. And the answer is because Pharaoh believed in himself. He didn't think that God was going to kill the firstborn. He didn't think he could do it. He believed God was going to lose. And therefore, he went to bed. He put on his pajamas, he went to bed. Like, what kind of a person in a struggle, life and death struggle, is going to put on his pajamas and have peace of mind and just go to sleep like it's a regular night? Only somebody who believes in himself. He believed that I am God. I'm going to do this. I'm going to accomplish this. That Hebrew God is a fake. He comes and says, I'm going to kill the firstborn. He's not going to kill the firstborn. And then when he kills the firstborn, Pharaoh is so shocked by it, because he honestly doesn't believe it. And that's why that he went to bed, and that's why he doesn't kill Moshe. And then the Midrash tells us an opposite story. The Midrash says that Moshe was 10 amas tall. That means that Moshe was about 37 feet tall. And it says that Pharaoh was the size of your thumb, like 3 inches. Right? So if Moshe was 37 feet tall, and Pharaoh was 3 inches tall, so if they're having a confrontation, why does Moshe just step on him? Just like squash him, kill him. Just like that, one foot. And it's the same answer. Because Moshe is not a fight between Moshe and Pharaoh. It's an ideological fight between who is God. It's a God of the Jews or Pharaoh himself. Who's God? So for Moshe to go and say, I'm going to squash Pharaoh, it's going to step on him, right? Now, you understand, and the Midrash says this, it's not telling you literally Pharaoh was 3 inches tall and Moshe was 37 feet tall. It's not telling you this literally. It's telling you a message that Moshe was a giant, right? In his intellectual, his spiritual, his leadership, he was a giant, and Pharaoh was a nothing, right? But they were probably both around normal size. Nevertheless, when Moshe was not going to step on Pharaoh, he wasn't going to attack Pharaoh because he wanted to prove God was God. Just like Pharaoh wanted to prove that I'm God. Moshe wanted to prove that the God of the Hebrews, our God, is the God. And therefore, there wasn't going to be a struggle between the two of them. It was a struggle between what they believed in. That's why it's so significant. That's why this whole story, the going out of Egypt, is so important to us. Right? We have another thing in here that comes up on 347, and it says that every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne to the firstborn of the maidservant who is behind the millstone, and the firstborn of the beast. There shall be a great outcry in the entire land of Egypt, such as has never been heard, and there shall never be again. But against the children of Israel no dog shall wet his tongue, against neither man nor beast, so that you shall know that Hashem will have differentiated between Egypt and Israel. What the heck is it talking about? No dog will wet his tongue. Right? No Jewish kids will be killed. That's a good thing to say. That's a miracle. No dog will wet his tongue. What it means, right, is saying to you, these words are saying at a simple level that the Egyptians are going to be crying. Every mother's going to wake up with a dead son. Every wife's going to wake up with a dead husband. The firstborn, right, in every family is gone. They're going to wake up screaming. What about the Jews? Are they going to scream? No, they're not going to scream. Now they're not going to scream, but I'm even going to change nature. Because if a Jew would get up in the middle of the night and walks outside, a dog will bark at him. Right? And like, if you go outside in the middle of the night and there's a dog, and your neighbor has a dog, he'll bark. It's not normal for you to be out. So even if the Jews would be up, there's going to be no noise. from them, right? Not even a dog will bark at them. And God's saying, I'm going to make a miracle. Not even a dog will bark at them. And because now the Talmud tells us that because of this, that because the dogs did not bark, that we reward the dogs. Because the natural instinct for a dog is to bark. He doesn't bark. So what is it? Because the Torah tells us later on that if you have meat and you shuck the cow, for instance, and it turns out that it's not kosher, you should give it to the dogs. That's what it says. You give the meat to the dogs because it's not kosher. You can't eat it. Right? So why does it say give it to the dogs? Because you have to dispose of it. What do I care who you give it to? Give it to a dog. Give it to a mountain lion. I don't care. Give it to whoever you want. God says the dogs. Why? Because he's rewarding the dogs for not barking. The dogs did God's will. That's what it says. Now, it's strange because first thing is they don't choose to do God's will. They have no free will. God just makes them so they don't bark. They don't bark. What did the dog do? So the first thing to understand is this is another expression of what we've been talking about the last few weeks is gratitude. That even a dog who doesn't bark because God doesn't let it bark, still we give him gratitude. In other words, a mailman brings mail to your house. Right? Is he paid to bring it? Yeah, he's paid to bring it. He's supposed to bring it. Is he doing you a favor? No, he's not doing you a favor. He's doing what he's supposed to do. Right? So when he brings you the mail, do you owe him anything? Well, you don't owe him anything in the real sense, but we say that you owe him your gratitude. He does a job, even if he doesn't do it great. He did the job. Did you benefit from him delivering mail? Yes, you benefit. So therefore you should have gratitude, right? Even though he doesn't know you, he doesn't necessarily do the job all that well, he gets paid to do the job, maybe more than some of us get paid. And nevertheless, we have to show gratitude. When you go to the store and somebody, right, rings you up in the Sobeys or in one of the stores, right? So do you have to say thank you to the woman who did it? She's getting paid to do it. You're getting good money for the food, right? But nevertheless, did you benefit from it? Sure. She did her job. She did her job well, let's hope. So you show gratitude. The dog did not bark. Is it because the dog said, hey, I'm not going to bark at the Jews. I'm going to be a good guy? No. Dog doesn't know. It's like being paid. The dog does what a dog does. Nevertheless, we show gratitude to the dog by giving him the treif meat as a gift for that reason. Now, we have this in another place. We have a thing called Peter Chamor, which this comes up a little later. Peter Chamor is the firstborn donkey. The firstborn donkey, it says, is holy. And it has to be used only in the area of the temple. You have to dedicate it for use in the temple. And if you don't dedicate it, you have to kill it. So how you dedicate is you redeem it. You go to the Kohen and you give him money, and the animal becomes yours. That's how it works, right? The firstborn of a donkey. That's what it is. So it's and the donkey, that donkey, if you don't redeem it, it has holiness, and you can't use it. You can't use it to pull a plow. You can't use it to take rides. It has to just wander around. It's holy. So you say, why does and why did that happen? It says because when the Jews left Egypt, the donkeys carried the jewels and the gold and silver that they acquired out with them. So again, did the donkeys choose to do it? No. That's what donkeys do. I have a donkey, right? It does what it's supposed to do. Nevertheless, we show gratitude to the donkey because it carried out the gold and silver. Even though it's a donkey, it had no choice. It's the same as the story as the dog, except there's a difference. In the case of the dog, you give him meat. In the case of the donkey, he's holy. It becomes holy. If you don't do it correctly, that animal can't be used. That's certainly a higher level. So why is it that when the dog doesn't bark, he has no choice, so we give him meat. But when the donkey carries out the jewels and the gold and silver for other people, right, for the people, then we not only treat him special, but he's holy. Why is that more holy than what the dog did? They both did what they're supposed to do. In both cases will show appreciation. So what's the difference? So the difference is with the case of the donkey, he's doing something for somebody else. In other words, he's carrying your friend's gold and silver. He's not carrying his own gold and silver. He's carrying other people's gold and silver. He's doing an action for others. And and this teaches us a lesson. It's one thing when we do what we're supposed to do ourselves, but it's a whole other story when we do what we're supposed to do for someone else. When we do it to help someone else, that's higher. That's holy. For me to take care of myself is a mitzvah. I have to go to the gym. I have to eat correctly. I have to do this. It's part. The Torah tells me I have to do these things to take care of myself. Right? I do it. I fulfill the mitzvah. There's also a mitzvah that I have to take care of you. I have to do things for you too. I have to make sure you have money for food. I have to make sure you can take care of yourself. I have to be there for you. Right? That's what I have to do myself. I have to do that for you. By my doing that for you, it's holier than my doing it for myself. That's what the message is here. The donkey was carrying out the jewels for other people, not for himself. And therefore, he becomes holy, not just recognized, but actually beyond it. So you see there the secondary message of why that's more important. To do things for others is more important than doing things for yourself. Not that you shouldn't do it for yourself, but you have to do both. We have on 349 the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people, starting in chapter 12. In fact, if you look back in the beginning of the Torah, it refers to this. I'll go back and show you. The first Rashi in the entire Torah, the first comment that he makes in the beginning of the book. I'll just read it to you, because it's right here back on page 2 and 3. Rashi says, he probably says it in English even. In the commentary it says, we begin to study the Torah with the realization of the following. Rashi asks a question in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak. He says, who says that the way he says it is, the Torah should really start with this line here. God says to Moshe and Aaron, this month shall be for you the beginning of months. That should be the first line of the whole Torah. This whole part of the Torah is unnecessary. Because what's the purpose of the Torah? To teach you how to live. This is the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people. So all of this is unnecessary, because this is where you learn how to live, starting here. Up until here, it's just stories. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Adam, and Eve, all of these people, right? What do I need that for? I need the laws, right? So that's what he asks. So there's all different answers. Rabbi Yitzchak answers because the people of the world are going to say that we stole Israel. Israel belongs to whoever was there. And we stole it. And we say, no, if you read this, you see that God gave it to the Jewish people. God created the world. He gave it to whoever was there, the Canaanites. And then God said, no, I don't want the Canaanites there now. I want the Jews now. And now it's our land. God gave it to us. Right? That's what Rabbi Yitzchak says. But other people explain as well that this teaches you how to be a person. The whole first section of the Torah teaches you how to be a mensch. Right? How do you act? Like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You act honest, right? Like they're honest. You act kind like they're kind. You act in the way, that's how a Jew acts. Right? It says Jews are merciful because we're the offspring of Abraham. And Abraham was merciful. So we're merciful. Right? We're actually merciful to a fault. Look at how we are in Israel. Sometimes we are so merciful that we harm ourselves. But we're merciful, right? That's how we know it. We're honest. This is how we know it. Right? It all comes from this part of the book. So the first part of the book tells you how to be a person, how to be a mensch. Then the second part tells you how to be a Jew. A Jew has to be a mensch. That's the introduction. That's step one. That's even before I educate you. I don't even let you into school until you're a mensch. Now that you're a mensch, I'll let you into school. Now I'll teach you how to be a Jew. And that starts here. This is not the first mitzvah in the Torah. This is the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people. Because this is the moment they become Jewish. We've talked before about we're the Hebrews. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Levi, Issachar, Zvulun. Were they Jews or were they Hebrews? Like today, a Jew and a Hebrew is the same. But we believe in general that before the Torah was given, the Hebrews were not Jews. Only when the Torah was given, you became Jews. Right? The real point was actually literally right here. It's actually before the Torah is given, just slightly before. We're only dealing now 3 months before, less than 3 months before the Torah is given. Right here. The moment the Jewish people are prepared to go and put the blood of the lamb on their doorposts and to make a commitment that they're going to be Jews, even if the Egyptians are going to try to kill us, we're going to remain Jews. That's when they became Jews, right there. And that's the beginning, the first mitzvah we get. And you say, I think God blew it. This is the first mitzvah he gives us. We go through this whole story, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then we have all these years of slavery. And then God does all these amazing miracles to take us out. And we go and we're going to put blood on our doorposts, and God's not going to kill us. The Egyptians are going to threaten to kill us because the blood is from their God, which we killed right in front of them. And God saves us. Right? And what does God say? Oh, make a calendar. You got to make a calendar, and it's done by the moon. What is that? God is like my party planner. Make sure I don't make conflicts in my calendar. That's the number. Well, tell me, say Shema, keep Shabbos. Tell me, save lives of people, give charity. Right? Some significant mitzvah, not make a calendar. Thank you very much. What do I need? Should be an afterthought. Right, but it's not, because the making the calendar is extremely important, because we're making a calendar. This is with Rosh Chodeshim, which is the beginning of a month. The word for month, Chodesh, is the same as the word Chadash, new. And this is the lesson that God's teaching the Jewish people. Remember, they've been slaves for generations. You had your grandparents were born as slaves, and they lived their lives as slaves. Your parents were born as slaves, lived their lives as slaves. You were born as a slave, you lived your lives as a slave. All you know is slavery. You have no idea what it means to be able to get up and eat what you want to eat, to do what you want to do. You have no idea. You just wake up, you go to work, you work until you fall asleep, and then you wake up again and you do it again. And you do the work whatever work they tell you, it makes no difference. If you like it, you don't like it, you have enough food, you don't. You do the work or you're dead. That's a slave. Right? These people were slaves. Suddenly they're told, you ought to make a calendar, and the calendar works on the moon, and the moon is new every month. It's Chadash, it's new. Chodesh is month, Chadash is new. We have a new moon every month, and just like the moon will go from nothing to a full moon back down to nothing, the same happens to you. You're going to have times when you're as low as you can get, where you're depressed and you're sad and you're destroyed and you don't see a reason to live and you don't see any happiness in your life, and you're going to give up. Don't give up. You have a special gift. The calendar teaches you this, that tomorrow is always better. Tomorrow things will happen. Tomorrow there'll be a better day. Remember I told you before how the Jews, they said, God's crying wolf all the time. And you're going to come out, you're going to come out, you're going to come out, you're going to come out. We never come out of Egypt. We keep packing and unpacking, packing and unpacking. We finally stop, right? God says, you never can stop. That's why he gives us this mitzvah. Do you know when the redemption comes? When you're at the lowest possible point. When things are worse, you can't see an out. It's the worst. There's a sword on your neck, and he's about to draw it and kill you. That's when God saves us. That's what it's saying here. There's always a better tomorrow. There's always a better future. There's always hope. Right? We never give up. And that message is the first message God gives the Jewish people. Because we're about to become to the world, we are the moral navigators to the world. Our job is to teach the world how to act, how to be correct, how to be honest, how to be kind. That's our job in the world. We teach the world to be moral. We taught them that there's one God. We taught them about charity. We teach the world all of these things. Some they've learned, some they haven't learned. Some they corrupted, some they didn't. Some of it we're still working on. That's our job. And you all know that if you're going to start telling people what to do, they're not going to be happy with you. And they're going to kill you and beat you up and chase you around and get rid of you and call you names and do everything they can to stop you from doing your job. And you're going to think there's no tomorrow. But remember that tomorrow is a new day. And it's new. And you're going to build back up. And I'm always here for you. And just like there's going to be one day every month when you look outside and there's no moon. He says, no moon, it's gone, it's done. The next day it comes back because it's there. I'm promising you, you will always exist. And you'll have good times, you'll have bad times because the world won't be happy with you. But this is what you're here for. You're here to make the world a better place. And that's why we have it. And that's why we have all the problems with anti-Semitism. Because when we're not doing what we're supposed to do, then the world is kicking us and saying to us, we don't need you. You're a waste. You with your foolish morality. You don't even keep your own morality. You're going to jail for this and going to jail for that, and you're doing this wrong and you're doing that wrong. Right? Who are you to tell us what to do? But when we're doing what we're supposed to do and we're living our lives correctly, right, then the world will start seeing who we are and what we're doing, and we start growing and getting back up to a full moon. Right? That's the idea behind it. That's why the first mitzvah that they've given to the Jewish people appears to be insignificant, but it's the foundation of our life. Our whole life is based on that. There'll always be a better tomorrow. Things will always get better. And that's what it is. And this is where he tells the Jews to go and take the lamb and kill the lamb and put it on the doorpost of your house. Imagine what they're going through. You could just think about it. Here they are, they're slaves, right? That means that the people that they live with are their boss. They can kill them and nothing will happen. Right? An Egyptian can steal from a Jew, rape a Jew, kill a Jew, and nothing will happen to them. It's perfectly allowed. You're my slave. You have no rights. You have nothing. Right? Suddenly that slave, who knows, his whole life has lived this way, is told, go out and take the god of the Egyptians and tie it in your front yard. Right? They believed that the sheep, right, was one of their gods. So you take a sheep, tie it in the front yard. Now you imagine the Egyptian walks by, the same Egyptian who could kill you like this and not get in trouble. And says, what are you doing with my God? Well, I'm going to kill it. I'm going to put its blood on my door. God told me to. Do you think that the Egyptians would be really happy with that? Yeah, you uppity Jews, right? You're slaves. Who are you to come and do this? Right? And they'll kill them. The Jews must have been shaking in their boots, right, to do this. But they did it. They realized that they had to go all in. Right? They had to be saying, if I'm going to be killed, I'm going to be killed. This is it. This is the moment of truth. This is the Super Bowl. This is it. Right? This struggle, whoever wins, wins. Right? So the Jews said, we're prepared. We're prepared to die. Are you going to kill us? God told us to do this. We're going to do it. And they did. And because of it, they didn't die. They were saved. Everybody else had death in their house, but not the people who put the blood on their doorposts. Those were the Jews. Right? And then they have the whole mitzvah of the Korban Pesach coming up. But this is really the significance of what happens here. If you look on 360 and 361, still in this parsha, it talks about the donkey that I talked about before, right? That sanctified to me every firstborn, the first issue of every womb among the children of Israel, of man and beast is mine. Right? That every firstborn Jew, right, is mine, God says. You know the idea of the Pidyon Haben, right? You know the Pidyon Haben is that every Jew, other than a Levi and a Kohen, when they have the firstborn child, they're supposed to be if it's a son, you're supposed to have a ritual where you redeem the son from the Kohen. So what does that come from? It comes from this. Originally, the way God planned it was that every family had if they had a firstborn son, that son became a Kohen. No matter who you were, that son was a Kohen. That was his job. He was dedicated to the temple for your family. So when your family had any needs, that son did it. Right? Then the Jews failed at the sin of the golden calf. And God realized that the Jews can't do this. So he created a tribe of Kohanim, a group, right, under Aaron, that they're the ones who work in the temple. But until that point, it was supposed to be, if you had a firstborn son, that son's job was to work in the temple. So therefore now, when you have a firstborn son, because he can't do that, you have to redeem him from the Kohen, who has to do it for you. Right? So you're buying your child back from the Kohen representing God, so that the Kohen now goes and does the job, not your son. And that's where it comes from, of redeeming your child, right? Because of our failures. And then you have it on the next page, on 363, at the bottom, it again talks about the firstborn of the livestock, of the animals, and the donkey, and as I spoke about before, of what happens with the donkeys. And then the parsha ends Right? Just giving you a quick description that how Pharaoh was stubborn and wouldn't listen, and finally he does. And then God says, it shall be a sign upon your arm and an ornament between your eyes, for with a strong hand Hashem removed us from Egypt. So we know this is the mitzvah tefillin. This is the only description of the mitzvah tefillin. By the way, this is one of the proofs that many people use to show you why there has to be an oral law. That the Torah itself, the written Torah, cannot be everything that God gave us. There had to be more. Because if I say to you, you should place this as a sign on your arm and a jewel between your eyes. If I just walk up to you and I say, I want you to go get something and wear it as a sign on your arm and a jewel between your eyes, would you know that that's tefillin? And that they're black and they're made out of leather, and you wear them in the daytime and not at night, and only men wear them, not women, and you have to be bar mitzvah, not before bar mitzvah? Would you know all that? What's in them, how they're written, how they're made? Of course you don't know it. That's all it says. How do we know what we're supposed to do? It has to be that there's an oral law. There has to be that God told Moshe more. So we know about this. Otherwise, we'd have no idea what it's talking about. There's many times this happens. Like, how do you know a sukkah has to be outside? You presume it's outside because you see them outside. But how do you know? It doesn't say it in the Torah. It says you have to live in a sukkah 7 days. That's all it says. What is it? Where is it? We know it has to be outside, but that's because of what we learned. It says you should have no fire in your camps on the 7th day. So, I don't know about you, but the fire in your camps on the 7th day means I can't have any fire in my house on Shabbos. That's what it means. So, do you have a fire in your house on Shabbos? Sure you do. You have heat on? You have fire in your house.
Automatic.
Yeah, but it's there. Do you have your lights are on? You have candles burning? You have food that's hot? You've got fire in your house on the 7th day. Because that's if you didn't have the oral law. You'd think. And there were people like that. There were people who didn't believe that there was an oral law, and they sat in the dark all Shabbos. Luckily, they didn't live here. They lived in Israel, so it wasn't so bad. But they sit here, it's because they're going to freeze to death. Right? That's why we have a mitzvah to eat hot food on Shabbos, because we're showing we believe in the oral law. That the Talmud, which is the oral law, tells me it doesn't mean you can't have fire in your house. It means you can't use the fire. Like directly. You can't cook on Shabbos, but you could have the fire on. You just can't use it. So if you have a furnace burning gas, burning oil, burning coal, and you lit it before Shabbos, that's fine. That can burn through your house in your furnace on Shabbos, but you can't light it. But if you don't have the oral law, you don't know that. Right? These are proofs for the oral law. This is one of the strongest ones of the tefillin, right? That you should wear this. Now, it's really as I said earlier, like, what does tefillin have to do with going out of Egypt in and of itself? And it's not that tefillin themselves have what to do with going out of Egypt. It's that the foundation of mitzvahs, of our mitzvahs, is so significant, going out of Egypt, that we have many, many, many mitzvahs that deal with it. Because it's so important to us to remember that God took us out of Egypt. He broke the laws of nature. He proved to the world once and for all that he exists. And anybody who comes and says he didn't exist, right, does not know history. They don't know that God took us out of Egypt. They can make all kinds of stories, all kinds of explanations. They can say it didn't happen. It's all made up. It's this, and this. But we have the Torah that tells us this. We have the history of it. We have different examples of things that show it. But in general, this is how we know. This is where it comes from. And therefore, all of these mitzvahs that we do are to remind us that it's real. Right? Judaism is not just nice. It's real. It's not aesthetics, like a nice painting on the wall. It's science. Like you eat poison, you die. Right? You do a mitzvah, you live. You do sins, you have a problem. I mean, it's real. It is literally real. It's just not physical, but it's real. It's as real as radiation. You walk into a place, God forbid, you walk into a place and there's radiation there, you'll die in a week, right? From a horrible death, from poisoning. But you don't see it, you don't taste it, you don't feel it, you don't nothing. Just a day later, you walk by and you start setting off radios, right? And then and then you were radiated, you're going to be dead, right? It's the same thing with Judaism, right? When it comes to Judaism, we don't see God, we don't feel God, but we know that he exists. And this is how we should remind ourselves of it, by teaching ourselves this concept of the mitzvahs. Every mitzvah that we do, or so many of the mitzvahs that we do, are remembering the going out of Egypt. It's extremely significant. Right? It is the foundation. It says that that it's based on nature. It was not possible for us to come out of Egypt. Like you imagine, you had like the blacks in America were slaves. Right? So how did they stop being slaves? They stopped being slaves because people decided that this is wrong. That it was against the way we look at things, that you should take people and treat them like that. They look different, they have different color skin, but they're people. You can't do such a thing, right? But imagine if you lived in a world that said you can do this, you're allowed. So who's going to stop it? Right? You have a slave. A slave is a great thing to have. You don't have to pay him. You imagine I could have a factory and have 100 slaves run my factory, and I'm going to make all profit. I don't have to pay anybody. I just got to feed them. That's it. They'll sleep on the floor of the factory. I'll give them leftover food, and that's all I need. They die. I'll just get another one. What do I care? It's just money for me. Right? Imagine the world was like this, where the world didn't think there was anything wrong with it. Right? That's how the world was back then. That's what it was like. There's nothing wrong with that. Right? Pharaoh was God. If you were an Egyptian, you were part of the godly people. Everyone else was subhuman. So for the Jews to get out of Egypt could only happen with God. Nobody else was going to come and save them. There was no Abraham Lincoln to come and save them. It was only God. And that was an enormous undertaking. That's why it's so significant here. And it's something that we have to remember, because it's something that changed history. And that's why we spend so much time on it. All right, and that takes us up to the next parsha, where we'll be talking about the splitting of the Red Sea and all of the things to do with it. All right?
Pharaoh, the eldest child.
The Medrash says that he was, and that God specifically told him, "You, I'm not going to kill. You are going to have to live through this."
Oh, I see.
That's what it says.
Why he didn't die being the firstborn.
It says, like the Midrashim, there's many Midrashim on this about, like, you had some families where two kids would die. So how could that be? You only have one firstborn, because it was the firstborn of the mother or the father. So if the father, like, let's say the mother had an affair, right, and she had a second son, but it was from a different husband because she had an affair, so they both die. Now she lose two sons, she's going to lose her husband too, because he figured out that she's having an affair. That's why she lost two sons. So all kinds of details went on here as well that made it that much more powerful. But even in the simplest level, the fact that I didn't go into it, but Moshe says it's going to be about midnight they're going to die. He doesn't say at midnight. God tells them, you tell Pharaoh, at midnight they're going to die. And Moshe says, about midnight they're going to die. Why is that? So it says that there's many reasons, but one is there's no such thing as midnight. It doesn't exist. It really doesn't. You're either one fraction of a second before midnight or a fraction of a second after. There is no such thing as midnight. Right? It doesn't exist. If you think about it, you take night and you split it in half. So where's midnight? Is it here or is it here? Well, this is before midnight, this is after midnight. So which is it? There is no midnight. So what God is saying is, at one moment they will be alive, and at the same moment they'll be dead. It'll be totally miraculous. It'll be a total miracle. You will not see them die. They'll be alive and dead, like this. 1 second, like not even a second. It's like I can't even describe it. But it's beyond in nature, because there is no such thing as midnight. It doesn't exist. And that's why Moses said about midnight, because he understood that the Egyptians may not have perfect clocks. They may not know exactly when midnight would be. So they're going to say, oh, yeah, all the firstborn died, but it was 2 seconds before midnight. So it wasn't your God. It was just coincidence. Right? That's how people are. People would do that. God said, I'm going to kill 500,000 firstborn, one in each house throughout of all of Egypt, I'm going to kill. Right? Exactly at midnight. And then Moses says, I'm going to tell them about midnight, because God will do it exactly at midnight, which doesn't really exist, but at that point, because God knows when that is, but the Egyptians don't know when it is. And they're going to come back and say, ha, Your God says he's going to kill the firstborn at midnight. He didn't. He killed him at 2 seconds before midnight. So that's not true. It's not your God. That's how far people will go, right, who want to grab at straws for their beliefs. They'll say, it's not true. But it's not a big enough miracle that one person in every house died, right? So they died 2 seconds early. The point was, Moshe didn't want to take that chance. So that's why he changes the words. And not because he doesn't believe God will do it. It's because he believes that the Egyptians don't have the capacity to understand. They're going to say it was 3 seconds after midnight. My son was alive, and then he died. So you see, God's lying. What do you mean? They're all dead. Doesn't matter. That's how people are. People will do crazy things to prove they're right. Right? Never have the opportunity. I've had the opportunity to sit in when they do a get, for a divorce. Divorce is hell, right? No matter what the reason, or who it is. But and a get is, you treat people with respect, but it's very difficult. And when people are going through everything to get to the point they're going to have a get, you'll have people say things like, I don't care what it costs me, she's not getting a penny. Right? You hear that? Now, that means he's going to spend $100,000 of lawyer's bills so that his ex-wife doesn't get $10,000. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. But they do it all the time. It's not the money, it's the principle. Right? As I always say, as soon as you hear that, it's not only you got trouble, but it's the money. It's not money, it's the principle. A guy's prepared to spend $1 million so his wife shouldn't get the car, which is worth $5,000. But he'll spend $1 million so she shouldn't get it. Why? Because it's not the money, it's the principle. Right? It makes no sense, but that's how we are. We want to prove we're right. And you're wrong. You're leaving me. I'm perfect. It's your fault. So therefore, I'm going to teach you. And that's exactly what Moshe was watching for. So he says, they're going to say, God killed all the firstborn, but he said it was going to be at midnight. It wasn't at midnight. It was at 11:02. So Moshe says, okay, I think that's not going to happen. I'm going to say about midnight, so that they don't say it. Not because they're right, but because they'll just say, it doesn't matter. And that's the end of it. Okay?
Thank you.